Hunter Biden is going to be featured in an art gallery in New York that's run by somebody named George Burgess. He's going to have 15 pieces featured, and they're asking anywhere between $75,000 to $500,000 for these pieces.
Oh, wow.
And kind of curious. I don't know if you saw the story, but what are your thoughts on this?
I don't know how. Like I said, I don't know how I missed this particular story. I think I'd heard some kind of jokes on morning radio. As you're driving, doing errands and things, going about your life, you hear something in the background about Hunter Biden art, and I just thought, okay, maybe he paints a little bit, but I was not aware that he had a big show going to be opening up in the really the second capital of the United States, New York City. Now, you said $75,000 to $500,000. Have you seen any of this art?
That's a great question. So we can put this in the show notes, but the Atlantic, who's kind of a left-leaning publication, did a really interesting story about it. But they interviewed an art critic, this guy named Sebastian Smee, who's so he said Biden is comparable to a cafe painter. He said by that, which I mean the kind of art you see in coffee shops. He was asked a little bit more. He said it's not bad, but it's not good. And he said it would be alarming if any art at this quality was sold for more than $1,000. So he's, it's pretty obvious. He thinks it's average at best. Probably not something that would bring in $500,000 or even $75,000 or even $2,000.
Right.
But I guess, I'm assuming this will all be sold. All these 15 pieces bring a hefty sum into our good friend Hunter.
Okay, there's a lot of things here. Okay, there's a lot of things here. People may think there's not. They think, oh, okay, of course the guy's going to be cashing in on the success and the fame of his dad. There's that. Okay, now I'm actually looking at his art, which is not terrible. It's pretty damn good, actually. It's not bad. I'd put some of this stuff on my wall. I was actually ready to just completely start shitting on this guy. But he's a pretty good artist. It's not bad. It's good stuff. And let's start with the art critic right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys are generally as pretentious as they come. Sometimes they, if you're photorealism, if that's what you're going for, you can pretty much critique that, and you could say, okay, well, his perspective's off, and he's not making good shadows from the sun or the light source, or the angle's wrong, something like that. But when it comes to any other kind of art, what are you critiquing? You're just critiquing whether you like it or not, because this is just shapes and colors, and so there's nothing for you to say, okay, he fucked that up, because there's no fucking it up. Now, is it worth, quote unquote, $75,000 to $500,000? Well, it depends on if you want to buy it or not. I would not spend $75,000 on this, but I've seen art that looks like this, and to my untrained eye, that has sold for millions of dollars. But of course, he is cashing in on his father's success, and I think the bigger point here is everyone knows he's cashing in on his father's success. He knows he's doing the same thing. His father knows it, and yet it's still going to happen because the gallery is still going to make money because these are actually going to be sold, and no one cares. And people care on our level, but people don't care on that level. That's a big. If you're talking about double middle fingers, that's a double middle finger more than Eli Manning could even hope to accomplish, because this is a big fuck you to anybody who thinks that they are actually running something, when this is just to show you that elite people in elite positions can do whatever the fuck they want.
I do think it's interesting he's going to make a ton of money off of this art, and I also find it interesting, and like if a celebrity, whoever it is that you follow, or let's just stay with Eli Manning. Let's say I'm a huge fan of his. He might have a bit of memorabilia that might not be worth that much to most people, but if you're like a mega fan, or even if you like kind of obscure things, like, oh hey, I got a piece of Hunter Biden's art, that's kind of weird, that's kind of cool, it's a little conversation topic, I don't know if it's worth $500,000, but so that's where these art critics are off a little bit too. I mean, my wife runs into this with real estate, where people are willing to pay a ton of money for a house that people might not think that it's worth worth that much. And they battle it out with appraisers and stuff like that because people are willing to pay more because of several different factors. But I agree with you. When you talk about what the Trump kids went through, with their companies and making money, and even Trump with his hotels, and I think it's like the emoluments that it's called, where he was still able to, or his organization was still able to make money whenever foreign dignitaries came to Washington D.C. and they would stay at the Trump hotel, and there was a lot of criticism against that. And here, I think there's one congressman that's talking about it. He's reaching out to this gallery owner, trying to figure out, how do we know who's paying this money? Will this stuff be just funneled to Joe Biden or something like that? How can they get a little transparency and stuff like that? So there, apparently these questions are being asked, but it is kind of interesting because in the previous administration, things like this were like 5-alarm fires, and this is just kind of this is barely making any news.
Well, this is Uncle Joe here we're talking about. We know Uncle Joe's not going to do anything below the board. He's an above the board man. He's an honest man. He's been in politics for 50 years. He doesn't really need the money, and that's true. He doesn't need the money. He's the president of the United States of America, and he's 79 years old. So he's not going to need the money, but he knows his son's going to need some cash when he shuffles off this planet. So it's interesting that everybody looks at Hunter Biden as a big fuck up, right? Because he is. But I mean, he's still a millionaire, and he's off of his dad and off of the dealings with China, and he looks like an artist, right? He's been strung on heroin for many years, and I think he had a crack pipe at one point. There was that whole debacle there. Like I said, his art's, it's all subjective, right? This is all subjective. Would you pay this much for this kind of art? Probably not, but we don't have this kind of disposable income. But yeah, if you're going to do it on a goof, and you're like 10 years from now, you're like, this portrait above my toilet, who painted that? That's fucking Hunter Biden, dog. That's why you buy these paintings. But you also, the money's not going to Joe Biden. Joe Biden doesn't need $500,000. He's been probably grifting the system for millions of dollars for many years, and money's not even a big deal to him because he has power, and power is much more useful than money could ever be in this instance.
And another thing with this Hunter Biden thing that's gone under the radar. So I find this interesting because these are more left-leaning publications that are coming out with some of this stuff. But Politico, there's a writer for Politico that recently did a little bit of research and is, I guess, coming out with a book soon. Was able to verify a few, not all of them, but a few of those emails in Hunter Biden's laptop. And so apparently they're slowly verifying some of that stuff that right before the election. I think 3 weeks. Yeah, exactly. Well, 3 weeks to a month before the election, and this was just an insane story on so many levels. But his laptop was found. It was at a laptop repair shop where there was this blind laptop repair guy. Somehow it gets in the hands of Rudy Giuliani, gets in the hands of the New York Post, and it was kind of the October surprise before the election. Mm-hmm. And social media started basically censoring anything that was on Twitter, Facebook, and so on about Hunter Biden's laptop. And now, almost a year later, it's starting to be publicized from left-leaning news sources that this is actually probably his laptop, which is so funny to me because all of the and I understand. Actually, I can't really understand it, but at the time they're thinking the Twitter and Facebook's justification for censoring everybody was this is hacked material. This is probably planted by the Russians to interfere with our election. Uh-huh. And then here we are a few months later, and it's like, oh wait, I think it actually is him. These are actually his pictures with random prostitutes and smoking crack and sniffing coke off of rugs and stuff like that, which is kind of funny. That was one thing I read, that his documentation of his sorry, we had a little bit of a connection issue, but one thing that one of these publications talks about, because I've never seen the laptop. You just you just hear what people that have access to write about it. But apparently Hunter was very good at documenting himself, with pictures and so on, with various prostitutes and so on.
That's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah. So it's interesting, that now this is being verified. And I mean, I don't really care. But at the time, I did think it was interesting that, Facebook and Twitter and so on were just saying that, no, you can't put, if it's about the laptop, you can't put this up. It's Russian material.
It's definitely interesting because it's alarming, and it's an overt stance, and we all just keep using Facebook. I was talking to you on Facebook Messenger before the show because that's how we primarily communicate, because we're guys who are approaching or in middle age, and that's how we communicate, is through Facebook Messenger. So everything we send in Facebook Messenger is recorded and there for posterity. So if we ever need to pull anything up years from now, it's always there. You can go in there and do a search for something you talked about in 2014. And thankfully, your dad Facebook is there to always remind you of what happened in the past and always record it, and it has access to all your photos and all your information. But there are some things, like that was an article from the New York Post that was talking about, I believe it was the New York Post, one of the oldest papers in the United States of America, said that this laptop was Hunter Biden's and it had all this information on it. And Twitter said, no, you can't talk about that. It's too close to the election. That's essentially what it was. We don't want to damage our guy. That's clearly what it was. And it's clearly what it was on Facebook and any other social media platform that's mainstream like that. Because there's a clear agenda. And anytime anyone says there isn't, all you have to do is actually scroll through your feed and see what's deemed offensive or too radical, or anytime you, like, if you say the word COVID, and I'm not going to start talking about COVID, but if you say that in Facebook and you try to share something, it'll automatically ask you, do you really want to share this? It's got COVID in it. Okay, so it's policing you all the time. In this day, when Hunter Biden was clearly doing some shady dealings with China, because what the fuck is Hunter Biden even doing in China, other than the fact that he's the vice president's son? That's the only reason he would have had any access to that. Otherwise, Hunter Biden is a crackhead who's a kind of a failed artist. And he really likes hookers, and he really likes strippers, and he really likes drugs. But no, he's on the board with this big energy company in China because he has access to his father. That's clearly the story. But that just gets suppressed, and it kind of further illustrates how terrible our system is when it comes to electing our leaders. And also the election itself, the campaign that leads up to it, starts 2 years before the actual election. What kind of madness is that? Where we just have these guys constantly parading around. It's this constant circus, and the incumbent has to go through this process the whole time he's actually supposed to be doing the job. It's a ridiculous system. And we all just say, this is a ridiculous system, and then we don't do anything about it. But now we're not going to do anything about it at all. I think we all kind of realize that anything we really want doesn't really matter anymore. Doesn't seem to be any consequences for any politician who doesn't follow the will of the people, because the will of the people can just be manipulated by social media to make them think one thing or the other.
Yeah, I'd like to describe Hunter Biden more as it's a true underdog story, right? He's the guy who shouldn't be an artist, but look, he's given the double bird to everybody and saying, oh, you think my art's only worth $1,000? Watch this. I'm about to be a multimillionaire soon, or again. And you don't think I should be on a board in China? Well, watch me. I mean, it's really an inspiration if you think about it. He's somebody with possible limited IQ abilities. He's had his stumbles along the way. I mean, this is somebody we should be proud of, maybe, or not. I don't know.
I agree with you. He gives hope to all the other kids of former vice presidents and senators, and that they too can, if their father or mother is powerful enough, they too can do pretty much anything they want to do in this world with no repercussions whatsoever.